They clapped too loud for a Wednesday morning. I stood by the break room table, half smiling as my co-workers surrounded me with streamers, cake, and a card signed by people who hadn't looked me in the eye all week. The banner overhead read, "Happy Birthday, Samantha," in bold gold print. But even the exclamation mark felt off, forced, like a cover-up for something no one wanted to name. The applause didn't match the mood. Slack notifications chimed nonstop with confetti emojis and corporate praise. "To the woman who just saved our biggest client, happy birthday! You carried Everest on your back. Sam, today's your day." But Everest had been signed 5 days ago, and for the past 4. I'd felt something cold building behind the walls, smiles that didn't reach eyes, conversations that paused when I entered. Derek's sudden disappearance from our daily briefings, Derek Rayner, our CEO, had always been cold, but at least he was consistent. Now? Silence. Vanished. Not even a happy birthday Slack message. Just radio silence from the man whose company I had just kept from bleeding out. I cut the first slice of cake while people recorded on their phones. It was chocolate, the one I said I didn't like 2 years ago. Across the room, Mara stood near the coffee machine, hugging her laptop. She was 26, a junior analyst I'd mentored from day one to day. Her eyes wouldn't meet mine. When they finally did, there was something unspoken behind them. Guilt, fear, or worse, pity. I reached for my coffee. My phone buzzed. One new email, no subject, no sender, just 6 words. "Your gift is in the glass room, 11:40 sharp." I reread it twice. No signature, no context. And yet, something about the timing made my stomach coil. It was 11:12 a.m. The conference room down the hall, all glass walls, no blinds, was empty now, but in exactly 28 minutes. Someone wanted me in there, alone. I looked around. People were still laughing, slicing cake, talking about weekend plans. But the party felt distant, like a movie set where the extras kept smiling just a second too long. I tucked the phone into my pocket and excused myself with a polite nod. Whatever this was. It had nothing to do with birthday candles, and everything to do with the silence that had been circling me all week. The last time I felt this kind of quiet before a storm. I was standing alone in a hotel lobby in Munich, 2 years ago. One suitcase in hand, a laptop that wouldn't connect to Wi-Fi, and a client ready to walk away. Everest had already drafted the termination letter. They were set to pull out of the U.S. market and cut ties with Veriton Dynamics entirely. Their CFO had cited strategic misalignment and communication breakdown. What he really meant was that no one at our firm had made them feel heard. No one except me. I wasn't even supposed to be there. At the time, I was a mid-level strategy manager, too junior to fly across the ocean solo for high-stakes negotiation. But when the account lead backed out due to a family emergency, I booked my own ticket. I didn't wait for approval. That's the difference between someone who's afraid to lose and someone who's already lost once. When I arrived, they barely acknowledged me. The meeting was tense. I was handed a pre-written transition plan and asked to walk them through how we dissolve the partnership smoothly. Instead, I asked for dinner. 3 hours later, we were seated at a quiet table in a wood-paneled bistro just off Leopoldstrasse. The CFO, the operations head, and 2 directors sat across from me, picking at grilled white asparagus and duck confit, and I listened. Not as a consultant, not as a representative of Veriton. I listened like someone who knew what it meant to be ignored. I asked them why they were pulling out. I asked what they wanted to build that we hadn't helped them reach. I asked them who. Exactly. They wanted to become in the next 5 years. By dessert. The mood had shifted. The CFO leaned back in his chair, sighed, and smiled faintly. "You know," he said, "your CEO always looks confused when we say your name." I blinked. Excuse me? Derek Rayner, he clarified. The few times we've met, we mentioned how you were the only one who followed through, the only one who sent solutions instead of excuses. He just nods, like he's never heard of you. I didn't respond. I just sipped my wine. That moment, sharp, quiet, precise, wedged itself into the back of my memory like a needle. After that trip, Everest stayed, not because of a new price cut, not because of a revised SLA. They stayed because someone showed up. Someone made them feel like the partnership meant something. I never told Derek about that trip in detail. I submitted a report. He skimmed it. No acknowledgement, no follow-up. But I remembered everything. The way the Munich night air smelled like pine and cold metal. The way the CFO's voice dropped when he asked if Veriton actually knew what kind of employee they had in me. And most of all, the voice of my mother, long gone by then, echoing in my head from a conversation years earlier. Let them think you're small. That's when you strike. I never forgot that. So now, 2 years later, standing in the center of a birthday party that didn't feel like mine, that moment came back with clarity. The look on Mara's face, the missing CEO, the empty praise. They still didn't know who I really was, but they were about to find out. It didn't happen all at once. Erasure, in the corporate world, is never loud. It's subtle, precise, a shift in tone, a calendar invite that never comes, a conversation that ends just as you enter the room. Mine began 3 months before my birthday, and by the time I noticed it, the silence was already systematic. At first, I thought it was a simple oversight. I wasn't CC'd on a leadership meeting recap I normally received every Friday. I emailed the assistant to Derek, our CEO, and she replied vaguely, "Oh, I think that was just a smaller group this time. We'll make sure you're looped in next week." She didn't, the following week. The agenda went out again. And again. My name was nowhere on it. Then came the project dashboards. For the past 5 years, I had led 3 cross-departmental initiatives, all tied to operations scalability and client acquisition, including Everest. Suddenly, my editing access to the dashboards disappeared. I could still view them, but every time I tried to make changes or even leave comments, the system bounced me back with an error. I flagged it to IT. They said my admin role had automatically downgraded due to department restructuring. Funny, no one told me my department was being restructured, especially not Derek. The real sting, though, came when I opened the internal newsletter and saw the headline, "New Leaders, New Vision, Meet Veriton's Growth Council 2.0. 10 names. 5 were people I'd worked with. 2 had once reported to me. All were now strategic vision leads, a title made up for the sake of PR polish. My name wasn't mentioned anywhere, not even in a sentence like, "former leaders who laid the foundation." I sat at my desk, hands still on the keyboard, the glow of the screen reflecting off the silver trim of the newsletter banner. Mara passed by my office that afternoon. She paused at the door. Hesitant. I could tell she'd seen it too. Her expression said more than words ever could. "You okay?" she asked. Voice soft. I nodded. "Of course. Just catching up." She lingered for a second, then left without pushing further. Smart girl. But the final confirmation came a week later, in the most mundane, unceremonious way possible. I had stopped by the shared printer room to collect a report I needed for an afternoon review. It was the usual chaos. Someone's 200-page client contract printing one sheet at a time. People forgetting to pick up presentations. I sifted through the stacks until I saw something labeled Succession Q2 SL Draft 3.pdf. I wouldn't have looked twice, except for 2 things. It wasn't stapled. My initials were in the file name. I pulled the document halfway from the tray. The top header read, Internal Succession Planning, Transitioning SL Responsibilities, Q2, Q3. It was a clean layout, titles, timelines, candidate names, skill gap assessments, all formatted perfectly, all signed off with Prepared by Dr. Derek Rayner. It didn't mention firing. It didn't mention performance. It simply described how to transition client visibility, internal credibility, and contract ownership away from me and toward someone else, a Connor R., someone I had briefly trained 6 months ago before he was moved into a separate department. I didn't take the paper. I left it there. I didn't want them to know I'd seen it. But in that moment, I understood what had been happening. This wasn't a miscommunication. It wasn't a clerical oversight. It was erasure, careful, intentional. They had begun removing me, not with confrontation, but with redirection, not with demotion, but with invisibility. The saddest part? No one said a word. Not HR, not Derek, not the people I had stayed late for, gone to bat for, coached through meltdowns and pitch decks. I walked back to my desk, shoulders square, face unreadable, but inside. The ground had already shifted. They thought they were deleting me from the system. They forgot. I had built half of it. There's a moment in every quiet betrayal where you stop asking why they're doing it and start planning what you'll do when they do. For me, that moment came the same day I found the Succession Q2SL document sitting at the communal printer. I didn't take it. I didn't even flinch. But that paper changed everything, not emotionally, strategically. I no longer wondered if they were pushing me out. I knew. So I did what Derek and his shiny little council of succession planners never expected. I started building my own exit ramp, not to walk away, to detonate after I was gone. It started with a Dropbox folder, innocuous, hidden behind decoy file names and generic folder tags like quarterly finance notes and ops charts V2. Inside it, clean copies of every contract I'd personally overseen for the last 4 years. Full revision histories, client notes, alternative pricing models, negotiation trails, internal memos. Then came the architecture drafts. Everest wasn't just a client. They were a system. Their needs spanned 5 departments, including a custom-built integration suite I had designed myself using 3 outdated tools duct-taped together by API workarounds. It was fragile. It was brilliant. And no one, not even IT, knew how it actually worked. Except me. While Derek's team spent their mornings holding strategic transition huddles, I was writing my own version of insurance. Not for them, for me. I stored the entire Everest integration logic into a side server, off-site, fully encrypted, legally untouched by Veriton. Why? Because the company never formally filed IP protection over the script. Too busy with press releases, too sloppy to protect what mattered. Then, in week 4, I reached out to Lennox Group. They were Everest's closest rival in the European market. We'd bumped heads with them once during a bidding war for a logistics optimization project in Spain. They lost. Politely, but I remembered their strategy lead, Diana Corbin. Smart, measured, dangerous in the best way. I didn't email from my company account. I used personal, secure channels. I didn't offer a job application or even float interest. I sent her a message with just one line. If Everest shifts, would you want to catch what falls? She replied within 12 hours. We arranged a Zoom call that Saturday at 9:00 a.m. Just 2 women with good lighting and steady eyes. Diana didn't need to ask what I was offering. She knew. You don't want to jump, she said. I don't. You want to hold the match and the fireproof suit. Exactly. Over the next 2 weeks, we worked in silence. I handed her non-confidential models, anonymized case timelines, and explained the ecosystem Everest operated in. She understood. Her legal team drafted a contingency clause unlike anything I'd ever seen. Clause 9.4. A trigger-based exclusivity term. If Veriton terminated my employment, under any condition, Clause 9.4 would activate instantly. Lennox would gain first rights to bid on any Everest-aligned contract not yet fulfilled. With the technical backing I'd provide post-transition, it was clean, fast, devastating. Diana looked at me one evening during our final review. Her screen was dark, except for the contract, and her voice was so steady it made the air feel colder. "You'll only need one email," she said. "Just don't blink first." I didn't smile. I just nodded. I knew what I was doing. I wasn't reacting. I wasn't crying in bathroom stalls or gossiping in break rooms. I was documenting, duplicating, and arming myself, piece by quiet piece. They thought they were moving me out, that I'd accept it, thank them, and vanish. They didn't know I was preparing a mechanism so precise that it didn't require revenge, just timing. So I kept going to work, kept attending meetings, kept smiling through fake team lunches and hollow, "Good job, Sam," moments, all while my hand hovered near the button they'd unknowingly placed in mine. Because when you know the system better than the people trying to erase you, you don't fight to stay. You plan how they'll fall. The pen was heavier than it looked, matte black with a brushed steel clip. It wasn't expensive, just reliable. A gift from a mentor on my first day at Veriton. I had used it to sign everything that mattered. My first executive promotion, my non-compete waiver, the onboarding docs for every major client I'd brought in. Now, 5 years later, I was holding it again, hovering over the final signature line of the Everest contract, the biggest deal Veriton had ever landed. The air in the room was still, the legal team unusually quiet as I reviewed the last clause one more time. It wasn't hesitation. It was precision. I made sure every page was in order. Every number matched what I'd negotiated. The final clause caught my eye. All future technical support, design adjustments, and integration queries must be directed to Samantha Levinson, primary architect of implementation. They put my name in the contract, black and white, inked, irrevocable, and they thought that would keep me tethered. I clicked the pen. One clean signature, no flourish, no comment. The room exhaled. Someone clapped. The CEO wasn't there. Of course! Derek didn't do signatures. He let others do the grit work, as he once called it. But it didn't matter. I had just put a chokehold on the company's future infrastructure, and they gave me the pen to do it. I slid the signed contract across the table. Legal picked it up like it was sacred parchment. I stood, excused myself from the glass conference room, and made my way to my private office at the end of the hall. The door clicked shut behind me. I sat down, opened my personal briefcase, and removed the Lennox agreement. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. No clapping here, no cold coffee and paper cups. Just me, the contract, and a very quiet NDA I'd memorized clause by clause. This wasn't celebration. This was leverage. I laid the papers side by side. One bore Veriton's logo, the other Lennox's. I reread Clause 9.4, the trigger clause, crafted for one purpose only, to become active only if Veriton terminated my employment. It didn't require public notice. It didn't require justification. One termination email, and Lennox would immediately assume competitive rights. It was surgical. I looked again at the pen. Same weight, same stroke, no emotion, with the same hand. I signed the Lennox agreement. Same ink, same flick of the wrist. 2 signatures, 1 future. I placed both contracts in their folders, sealed them, and placed them in 2 different drawers. One in my Veriton cabinet, the other in a locked briefcase I kept under my desk. The paradox wasn't lost on me. They thought power was about presence, who sat at the table, who gave the speeches. But real power was written quietly, often by the people no one thought to watch closely. I leaned back in my chair, letting the air settle. My calendar chimed, 1:15 p.m. Another strategy session I wasn't invited to. Another room I didn't need to be in anymore. Everest had handed me control of their systems, and Veriton hadn't even noticed. Lennox had positioned me as a future architect, if the dominoes fell right, and in both agreements. One common thread held the key. Me. Not my title, not my department. My name, my signature, my silence. I opened my top drawer, returned the pen to its case, and clicked it shut. From this point on, I wouldn't need to raise my voice. I wouldn't need to defend myself in meetings, or prove my worth through late nights and spotless reports. All I'd need was the email ready in my drafts, and the memory of how cold control always beats noisy chaos. Suspicion, like smoke, doesn't need a fire to exist. It slips under doors, clings to skin, and lingers in the air long after the party ends. By 8:45 a.m., the morning of my birthday, the office already felt thick with something unspoken. People were polite, polished, but every smile had a delay, every laugh a second too forced. Then came the NDA. It hit everyone's inbox at 9 a.m. sharp. Subject line: Team Alignment Update. Immediate action required. The sender? HR? Inside was a 3-page non-disclosure agreement that read more like a muzzle than a protection policy. It banned discussion of all internal restructuring efforts, strategic role transitions, and, oddly, ongoing contract framework adjustments. The kind of language that pretends to sound normal but doesn't breathe right when you read it aloud. Most employees probably clicked agree without reading, but Mara didn't. I found her frozen outside the break room, her laptop half closed, her eyes flicking between the screen and the cake table beside her. Her voice, when it came, was low and tight. "They made me sign it. Sam," she said. "They told me it was standard, just company housekeeping, but—" She stopped herself, glanced around. "But it mentions your name in the version I saw. Not directly, but close." I looked at her, really looked, and realized for the first time just how scared she was. Mara wasn't the type to panic. She was calculated, deliberate, like me. And if she looked shaken, then something wasn't just wrong. It was premeditated. I nodded slowly. "You did the right thing." That's when I noticed the cake. It sat on the table in a plastic dome, standard office celebration fare, white frosting, blue piping. The usual, only this time. The handwriting on the cake read, "Happy birthday, Stephanie." Stephanie. There was no Stephanie in our department. There hadn't been in the 7 years I'd been there. They had ordered the wrong name, for the person who'd just closed the largest contract in company history, and no one even noticed. That should have been the story. But it wasn't. The story was what I found after something that made my blood drop a degree. I had gone into the document archive to double-check some formatting for Everest's implementation plan. Nothing unusual. Until I stumbled on a PDF labeled, "Everest Final Execution Copy, V6 Signed." I opened it. Every page was there, terms, numbers, delivery schedules. But when I scrolled to the signature page, something caught me. The signatures were scanned. That wasn't unusual in itself, except my name wasn't on it. No Samantha Levinson, no SL, no mention of me anywhere in the official version. Instead, a scanned image of a signature from our CTO was slapped onto the bottom right corner. Under the line marked Strategic Oversight Lead. I blinked, scrolled up, then down again. No initials, no hidden mention in the metadata. Nothing. They had submitted a version of the contract without me. And yet, I had signed the original, in ink, with my own hand, using my own pen. I minimized the screen and stared at the wall for a long moment. It wasn't just an oversight. This was erasure, baked into the paperwork. If Everest ever questioned who led the build, Veriton would have plausible deniability. No paper trail, No name to trace, no me. I walked slowly back to my office, the hum of fake birthday chatter still echoing down the hallway. I could hear someone singing, off-key, hollow. I closed my door, locked it, and sat down. They had changed the cake. They had changed the signature. They had started changing the narrative, but I hadn't changed one thing. My copy. The real, ink-signed, time-stamped Everest agreement, secured, sealed, and stored with its twin, the one where I still existed. And when the time came, it wouldn't be the frosting or the fonts that spoke for me. It would be that signature, cold, silent, and undeniable. The invitation came precisely at 11:15 a.m. A Slack ping from Derek's assistant. Short and cold. Hi, Samantha. Derek would like to see you in Conf Room 3 at 11:40 a.m. HR and legal will be present. No subject, no context, no smiley face. I stared at the message for a long beat. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I understood it too well. 11:40 a.m. Same time mentioned in the anonymous email earlier that morning. Your gift is in the glass room, 11:40 sharp. I stood, straightened my blazer, and reached into the drawer for one thing. My pen. Not because I planned to use it, but because they had no idea what it had already signed. As I walked down the corridor, the air changed, not colder, just heavier. People looked up from screens and quickly looked away. Conversations thinned out. Mara wasn't at her desk. Neither was the director of operations or the finance lead. Like the floor had been cleared in advance. Conf Room 3 sat at the end of the hall. All glass. No blinds. Transparent. On the outside. Inside. It was anything but. Derek was already seated, legs crossed, phone face down on the table. He didn't stand, didn't smile. HR manager Lauren sat across from him with a neutral face perfected by years of restructuring conversations. The company's legal counsel, Marcus, filled the third chair, jacket off, tie still perfect. I stepped in, closed the door behind me, sat down. Thanks for joining us, Lauren began, her tone syrupy and robotic. I know today's a special day for you. Let's just get to it, I said calmly. She nodded, flipping open the folder in front of her. As part of an ongoing strategic reorganization, the executive team has made the decision to sunset the role of strategic systems liaison, effective immediately. I blinked once. Sunset? It's corporate language for dissolve, Marcus added, as if he were clarifying a menu item. Derek said nothing. He hadn't looked at me since I walked in. No mention of Everest. No thank you for saving the company's most valuable contract. No severance. No bonus. No offer to transition. Just an envelope. With my name. And a release form. Of course, Lauren continued. We ask that you avoid discussing the terms of this exit with your team or any clients. This is to maintain workflow stability during the transition. The way she said transition made me feel like a hard drive being reformatted. I didn't speak. I didn't blink. I just reached forward, picked up the envelope. And as I did, something slipped out. A sheet of paper. Not meant for me. It fluttered to the floor like a mistake they weren't expecting. I bent down slowly and read it upside down. Action item. Confirm Connor R. as SLE replacement within 24 aid. Transfer client dashboard access by end of day. Block legacy system permissions by noon tomorrow. Connor. The fresh-faced analyst I'd trained 6 months ago. The same one who had once asked me how to schedule recurring calendar invites. I handed the page back without a word. Lauren's cheeks flushed, but she said nothing. Derek cleared his throat, finally lifting his eyes. You've had a long run. Sam, let's not make this harder than it needs to be. I smiled then. Not wide, not kind, just enough for him to register something behind my eyes. Because the truth was, I wasn't angry in that moment. I was past anger. I had spent the last 3 weeks preparing for this exact conversation. Every contract copied, every data point duplicated, every clause signed, every email saved. I stood, pen still in my hand. "Thank you," I said, steady and quiet, "for the clarity." And with that, I walked out, past the glass walls, past the fake laughter from the break room, past the cake with the wrong name. The match had been struck. Now it was just a matter of when the flame would touch the fuse. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even breathe differently as I stepped out of the building that had once called me indispensable. The sun was bright, too bright for what had just happened. The breeze was gentle, indifferent. People passed on the sidewalk outside Veritan's headquarters, chatting, sipping lattes, checking their phones like nothing had detonated behind those glass doors. But I had felt it, the detachment, the surgical erasure, the way they peeled my name from the walls and smiled like it was a paper cut, not a wound. I slid into the driver's seat of my car and closed the door. The quiet was immediate, like a vacuum seal. I reached over to the passenger seat, placed my bag down, and opened it slowly. Inside, one slim laptop, one black folder, one pen in its metal case. I booted the laptop, 11:58 a.m. The desktop loaded. I connected to my private, encrypted network. No VPN from Veritan. No office Wi-Fi. This was my system, mine alone. The email was already drafted. I had written it 4 days ago. The subject line read exactly as planned. Subject trigger, clause 9.4. Activated. I reviewed it once, not to revise, but to appreciate. The language was crisp, legal, unapologetic, as outlined in Section 9.4 of the signed contingency agreement between myself and Lennox Group. This message constitutes formal notice of employment termination under qualifying conditions, effective immediately. The Lennox Group will assume all reserved rights specified in Clause 9.4, including but not limited to strategic transition access, exclusivity rights for pending contracts, and proprietary system recommendations. No emotion, just power. Precisely measured. The recipients were already in place. Everest's legal team, Lennox Group's strategy division, Veriton's board of directors, and one final name, Mara Roth at veritoncorp.com. She had earned it, the girl who signed the NDA with shaking hands, the analyst who looked at me with apology and warning in the same breath. She deserved to know what real agency looked like, what it sounded like when silence carried more weight than screaming ever could. I hovered over send, and then paused, slowly, deliberately. I opened the side pouch of my bag, unsnapped the metal case, took out the pen, the same pen that had signed the Everest contract, the same one that had signed the Lennox contingency, the same one that Veritan would never hold again. I placed it gently on the passenger seat, not as a farewell, as a marker, a ritual, because everything that needed writing had already been written. I clicked send. The screen flickered once. The message vanished from drafts and appeared in sent. There was no sound, no alert, no cinematic beep. But in that moment, I knew, in the next 30 minutes, Everest would call Veritan's board. In the next hour, Lennox's strategy team would prep the public transition briefing. By 3:15 p.m., Veritan's Slack channels would erupt in confusion. By tomorrow morning, the press would smell blood. I leaned back in my seat, closed the laptop, and stared out through the windshield. Not with triumph, not with vengeance, just stillness. That was the thing about real power. It doesn't shout, it waits. Waits for someone to think you're gone. Waits for the moment their guard drops. Waits, patiently, quietly, until the ground beneath them gives way, and all that's left is your name, written exactly where they tried to erase it. By 3:15 p.m., the silence I'd sent out just over 3 hours earlier began making noise. Not through alarms, not through panic, but through stillness, where motion used to be. It started with a message forwarded to my personal inbox from an internal source I never named, never thanked, never needed to. Subject: urgent. Everest requests immediate access. Freeze, please disable Veriton credentials across all Everest project channels. This includes tech dashboards, cloud services, and executive portals. Confirm revocation within the hour. No exceptions. I read it 3 times. The timestamp: 3:04 p.m. The sender: Everest Legal. The recipients: Veriton's board, CIO, systems admin, not Derek. No explanation, no courtesy, just a bullet to the heart of the operations core. That was the first thread pulled. The others followed quickly, unraveling one by one. At 3:21 p.m., the first Slack messages leaked. Anyone else just get kicked out of the Everest Drive? Is this maintenance or something else? Why is there no access log from the API team? Everything's dark. Wait, is Everest gone? By 3:35 p.m., the client integration channel went eerily quiet, normally filled with chatter, calendar syncs, sprint questions, contract handoffs. It now showed just one update. This channel has been archived. It hadn't been discussed. It hadn't been voted on. Someone in leadership just pulled the plug. And that's when the messages started coming in. Not from Veriton, but from the outside. 3 different clients, not Everest, but all adjacent partners, reached out to project managers with nearly identical phrasing. Please pause all scheduled touchpoints until further clarification from our legal department. We're temporarily halting contract finalization. Will advise. We are reevaluating vendor relationships following today's developments. By 4:00 p.m., Veriton wasn't bleeding. It was paralyzed. But the moment that drove it home, that made me press my back into the leather seat of my car and close my eyes for 3 seconds, was this. At 4:12 p.m., the company's lead legal counsel, the one who had sat across from me just hours earlier, filed a resignation notice effective immediately. No 2-week courtesy, no transition memo, just a 6-line email to the board and a BCC to HR. Due to ethical conflicts and serious breakdowns in executive decision-making, I am stepping away effective immediately. I didn't need to see Derek's reaction. I didn't need to hear what the board was doing or how the Slack channels were being sanitized in real time. I didn't even need to know how many internal calls were bouncing between departments as people scrambled for answers. I knew the pattern. I knew the way institutions buckle, first at the edges, then at the core. What I felt wasn't revenge, not exactly. It wasn't joy either, but it was something sharper than satisfaction. Tense satisfaction, like watching a structure tilt in slow motion, knowing precisely which beam you removed hours earlier to make it inevitable. Because I didn't need to push. I didn't need to argue or scream or return to the building I was erased from. I had already walked out, my hands clean, my tracks invisible. And yet, somehow, everything was moving exactly as I had designed. From the seat of my car, parked in a quiet garage 6 blocks away from Veriton headquarters, I could almost feel it. The vibration of loss, of confusion, of realization that the one person they dismissed was the only person who knew how to hold it all together. They could still try to explain it, spin it, patch it, but the systems I built didn't care about spin. The clients didn't care about PR. They only cared about stability. And at 3:15 p.m., I took it away, quietly, completely, with just one email. By the next morning, the silence had become something else. Not absence, not fear, contagion. It moved in waves, one resignation email, then another, first from the engineering floor, then from client services, then marketing, legal, HR. Whole sections of Veriton began to feel hollow, like someone had scooped out the structure and left only a skeleton. The office still looked full from a distance, but inside, it was collapsing one keystroke at a time. It began with the people no one expected, the quiet ones, the reliable ones, the ones who had never caused a stir or shown ambition beyond their cubicles and color-coded folders. But they had watched, they had seen, and when they saw what happened to me, the erasure, the redirection, the silent dismissal on a birthday, they understood. If it could happen to the person who built Everest, it could happen to anyone. At 8:40 a.m., Mara's resignation hit. It was short, brutal in its honesty. No warm wishes, no polite language, just facts. Subject: departure notice. Immediate after witnessing the removal of a leader who embodied everything this company claimed to value: integrity, resilience, innovation. I no longer believe loyalty means anything here. I'm resigning effective immediately. Do not contact me for knowledge transfer. You erased her. You don't deserve what she built. The message hit like a hammer. But the ripple didn't stop with email. By 9:20 a.m., LinkedIn exploded. Someone, a former employee, maybe someone still inside, posted a blurry photo of the birthday cake. The one that said, "Happy birthday, Stephanie." No caption. Just a hashtag, "They fired her anyway." At first. It was just a few reposts. Then came the comments. From current employees, from clients, from interns and freelancers who'd seen my name on implementation memos but never knew my face. I remember seeing Samantha on 6 a.m. calls every Monday for the Everest prep cycle. She never missed one. She stayed on a Zoom call with my team until 2:30 a.m., helping us fix a billing sequence she didn't even break. When I got promoted, she was the first leader to send me a handwritten note. I still have it. And then came the clip. At 10:15 a.m., a 15-second video surfaced, shot on someone's phone during a town hall the year before. Derek, standing at the front of the all-hands meeting, sleeves rolled, hands in pockets, confident, dismissive. "Look, we don't need names. We need results. If people want recognition, they're in the wrong business." The video had low audio, bad lighting, but the internet didn't care. It was shared over 50,000 times in 2 hours. Every repost tagged the same phrase. They fired her. Anyway, clients started commenting, quietly at first, then more openly. A procurement lead from a shipping tech partner wrote, "We delayed signing because Samantha wasn't on the final call. Now we understand why." An industry journalist shared the clip with the caption, "Sources confirm Veriton lost its largest contract on the same day they sunset the role that won it." Veriton's PR team tried to respond. They posted a 3-paragraph statement filled with buzzwords: strategic realignment, team-based evolution, continued excellence. But the replies were brutal. "You fired her on her birthday. Your realignment looks a lot like retaliation. Everest didn't drop. You pushed them away." By 11:50 a.m., over 24 employees had resigned or gone on sudden leave. HR stopped answering calls. IT struggled to disable badges fast enough. Internal systems froze under the pressure of so many credential revocations at once. And through it all, I didn't say a word. I sat in the same car, parked in the same garage 6 blocks from their front door, watching the world do what I never needed to ask for. See, not just me, not just what they did, but what it meant. This wasn't just about Samantha Levinson. This was about every quiet worker who stayed late without asking, every woman who didn't smile in meetings and got labeled difficult, every strategist who delivered results and got erased when the applause started. They didn't just fire me. They revealed themselves, and all I had to do was let the silence speak louder than their statements and watch as the ripples turned into waves. Justice doesn't always wear sirens and spotlights. Sometimes, it's delivered in a press release, neatly formatted, cold as steel, and timed for maximum impact. By 7:15 a.m. the next day, the story had broken. Everest's official statement landed in inboxes across the industry like a precision airstrike. No drama, no apology, effective immediately. Everest Global is terminating all partnerships with Veriton Dynamics. We are initiating a full systems transition to a new strategic partner. We thank Samantha Levinson for her leadership in building a foundation we intend to honor moving forward. My name, in writing. Their CEO's name, nowhere to be found. That alone would have been enough. But fate, or maybe karma, wasn't finished, less than an hour later. Veriton's internal Slack leaked again. Someone in HR, either furious or fed up, forwarded an emergency staff bulletin to a journalist at Tech Ledger Weekly. The headline ran by 9:40 a.m. Breaking: Veriton CEO placed on administrative leave amid mass resignations. Contract fallout. The article didn't pull punches. Derek Rayner, who served as CEO of Veriton Dynamics for 4 years, has been placed on immediate leave following the loss of the firm's largest contract, the abrupt resignation of its senior legal counsel, and a wave of public criticism over its handling of key personnel decisions. Sources confirm board members were unaware of a separate clause, referred to internally as Clause 9, FOS, that triggered a transfer of contractual advantage to a rival firm following an executive termination. The details were out, but what made it devastating wasn't just the board's embarrassment or Derek's ousting. It was what came next. By 11:10 a.m., an anonymous tip was posted to a whistleblower forum used by ex-employees in the tech sector. The post alleged that Veriton had been misallocating funds from its employee wellness program for the last 16 months, diverting resources meant for mental health services, childcare reimbursements, and professional development into discretionary executive stipends. Screenshots followed, receipts, memos signed by Derek. But the worst detail? Over 40% of those discretionary payouts went to 2 individuals with no listed job titles: Derek's nephew and the personal assistant of his longtime partner, neither of whom had ever been seen at Veriton HQ. By noon, the story hit mainstream business news, CNBC, Bloomberg, Forbes. Veriton's stock dropped 17% in under an hour. As if that weren't enough, another leak broke at 12:30 p.m., an internal email forwarded to multiple media outlets. It was brief, but it said everything. From Derek Rayner to board exec at veritondynamics.com. Date 3 weeks prior. Her value was a risk. That's why we cut her. That line. Her value was a risk. Not her performance, not her attitude, not even her visibility. Just the fact that she had value, and that someone might see it. That line went viral. It was retweeted, reposted, and stitched into video essays and think pieces about how corporate cultures reward conformity and punish contribution. People who had never heard of me were suddenly writing about how I symbolized the expendability of excellence. Articles flooded in with titles like, "The High Cost of Silence," "Erased Before the Credits Rolled," "When Loyalty Gets You Fired." But I didn't say a word. I didn't do interviews, didn't take phone calls, didn't reply to any of the polite messages from people who had once ghosted me in meetings and now wanted to reconnect. I simply watched from a distance as justice, cold, clinical, and overdue, made its way through the system like frost through steel piping. And I felt nothing but clarity. This wasn't about revenge. I never wanted to destroy them. I just wanted to prove they were never bulletproof, that when a company erases someone not because they failed, but because they succeeded without permission, there's always a cost, and I had quietly made sure that cost was written in ink. By 3:00 p.m., Veriton's homepage displayed a stripped-down banner. "We are realigning leadership and operational strategy." But they weren't realigning. They were unraveling. exactly as they deserved. I didn't check the mail for 2 days. The world had been moving fast enough. Veriton's collapse was already the subject of case studies and podcast episodes. Everest had publicly completed its migration to Linux, while Derek's name trended across platforms for all the wrong reasons. But on the morning of the third day, something told me to open the front door. There it was. One box. No return label. No branding. Just my name written in small, elegant letters. Samantha Levinson. I carried it inside and placed it gently on the table. No rush. No suspense. Just awareness. A quiet knowing. I opened it. Inside, nestled in a bed of matte black velvet, was a pen. My pen. The same matte black one I had used to sign every deal worth remembering. The one that signed the Everest contract. The one that signed the Lennox contingency. The one I had placed on the passenger seat of my car after sending the email that changed everything. But now it was engraved, just 2 words. Only once. Below it was a handwritten card. Creamstock, subtle ink. Lennox's seal faintly embossed at the bottom corner. This time, sign only once. Happy birthday, Samantha. DC Diana Corbin, strategy lead at Lennox. The woman who helped me weaponize silence with the elegance of law. She didn't send congratulations. No hollow, welcome aboard. Just a message I would understand without needing to reply. This time, sign only once. Because now, there would be no backup contract, no fallback, no fire to put out. This wasn't survival. This was arrival. I stood at the window, holding the pen like a relic. The weight was the same, but it felt different now. Not like a tool, not like a weapon. It felt like freedom, no titles attached to it, no organizational chart defining where I fit, no emails where my name was removed, no cakes with the wrong inscription, no rooms full of people clapping for someone else's work. Just one name, one pen, one life. Mine. I set the pen back in its case and closed the lid. Not to hide it, but to honor it. That pen had written contracts. Yes, but it had also written boundaries, exits, and truths. And when I turned back to my desk, I saw the line still written across my journal, the line I had scribbled weeks ago in a moment of clarity, before the collapse began, before the resignations and the headlines. When loyalty is betrayed, precision becomes power. I hadn't written it for the world. I had written it for myself. But maybe, now, someone else needed to read it too, because somewhere out there, another woman is sitting in another boardroom, watching her name get skipped over, her access get quietly revoked, her impact slowly absorbed by louder voices with fewer receipts. And she might think no one sees it, no one values it, no one will ever know what she did. But I do. And maybe you do too. If you've ever felt erased in a place you helped build, if you've ever watched someone else take credit for what you held together in silence, if you know what it's like to win quietly, alone, then this story is for you. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because stories like this, they don't just belong to me. They belong to every woman who didn't get the cake she deserved, but got the last word instead. And if this resonated with you, go ahead, like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more true stories of quiet power, calculated resilience, and poetic justice. Because silence isn't weakness. It's just the beginning of the loudest kind of victory.